Hello everyone. Today I'm going to tell you about a horrifying tragedy that shook all of Australia. A hidden corner in a quiet estate. A woman's lifeless body with no clothes, lying motionless on the green grass. Her body covered in serious injuries, blood soaking an entire area. But what's even more terrifying is the victim's eyes wide open, reflecting infinite fear and despair in her final moments. When police arrived at the crime scene, even the most experienced detectives had to turn away, unable to bear the sight of such horror. Judges at the time described this case as one of the most brutal, savage and inhuman murders in Australian history. Public outrage surged high. People gathered outside the courthouse, demanding that the death penalty be reinstated to punish these inhuman beasts. So what exactly happened? Let's go back in time to 1986 to understand the tragedy that shocked the entire nation. Blacktown is a town located in the northeastern part of New South Wales, Australia. It has a mild climate and beautiful scenery, perfect for family holidays. As a multicultural city, Blacktown's residents come from all over the world, speaking over 60 different languages, creating genuine cultural diversity. However, between the 1980s and 1990s, Blacktown became a hotspot for crime. Gangs roamed freely, drug trafficking flourished, and violence was frequent, making this area a focus of police attention. The story we're about to explore is one of the most significant cases that occurred in Blacktown during this dark period. The main character of our story is named Anita Lorraine Cobby, a 26-year-old nurse. She had a cheerful, friendly personality, a beautiful face, a well-proportioned figure, and had won the title of Beauty Queen of the region. At that time, Anita was working at Westmead Hospital. On May 10, 1986, an ordinary day like any other, Anita didn't come to the hospital, and no one could reach her by phone. Lynn, her best friend and colleague, felt uneasy and called Anita's parents. To her surprise, they told her that Anita hadn't come home the night before. Lynn clearly remembered that the afternoon before, after work ended at 3:30, she and Anita, along with a few friends, went to a nearby restaurant to hang out. Everyone chatted loudly, drank 2 bottles of wine, and didn't leave until 8 p.m. Anita's house in Blacktown was quite far from the city centre, so Lynn drove her to Central Sydney Station to catch the 9:12 p.m. train. When Anita arrived in Blacktown, she was supposed to call her father from a public phone, and he would pick her up. But when Lynn contacted Anita's family, she found out that Anita had never called her father the night before and had never come home. Anita's father, Mr. Lynn, was extremely worried. At first, he thought his daughter might have slept at a friend's house since last night's gathering ended late. But now his daughter had completely disappeared. Mr. Lynn immediately contacted friends to search throughout Blacktown and Sydney, but found no trace. Finally, at 6:30 p.m., he had no choice but to report it to the police. Police quickly launched a search operation, but Anita seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving no clues behind. Based on their experience handling missing women cases, police suspected Anita might have been harmed by someone she knew, so they began investigating her social relationships and background, hoping to find leads. Anita was born on November 10, 1959, in Blacktown. Her father, Mr. Lynn, was a graphic designer in the military, and her mother was a skilled nurse. She grew up with her younger sister. Both sisters were excellent students and loved sports, especially surfing. Anita was always the center of attention. From childhood, she was beautiful and adorable. Growing up, Anita became even more stunning with harmonious features, tall stature, and charm rivaling movie stars. In 1979, she won the regional beauty contest. With her looks and talent, Anita could easily have entered the entertainment industry. However, she had her own plans. Anita didn't want to rely solely on her appearance to make a living. Instead, she wanted to do something more meaningful, so she followed in her mother's footsteps and became a nurse at Westmead Hospital. And it was at this hospital that Anita met John, her boyfriend. John was born in 1956, 3 years older than Anita. He had a handsome appearance with striking blue eyes, golden blonde hair, and a lively, cheerful personality that always made people laugh. John's background was quite varied. He had done all kinds of jobs, from laundry to dishwashing to security. Whenever he made some money, John would go traveling and surfing, living a free and easy life. Later, he decided he'd had enough fun. John wanted to settle down, so he registered for nurse training at Westmead Hospital. That's when he met Anita and fell head over heels in love with this beautiful girl. But Anita's radiant beauty made him feel inferior. He didn't dare talk to her, just secretly admired her from afar. However, destiny is full of surprises. Anita noticed this always smiling guy and was attracted to his humor and energy. She took the initiative to approach him. Their first date took place at a Lebanese restaurant near the hospital. After just one meal, they both developed feelings for each other. From then on, they met frequently, chatted, and gradually their feelings deepened. Before long, they officially became a couple. After more than a year of dating, John finally gathered the courage to propose to Anita, and she agreed without hesitation. On May 27, 1982, this attractive young couple officially got married in the blessings and admiration of friends and family. Everyone said they were a perfect match. Their married life was extremely sweet and happy. Although Anita unfortunately had a miscarriage, they didn't sink into sorrow but remained hopeful about the future. They raised 2 adorable dogs, frequently went out for dinner, listened to music, and even bought a small boat to prepare for future trips. In 1984, thanks to a friend's recommendation, John started working as a horse trainer. A year later, he got lucky and won big money in a horse race, winning $10.0000 Australian dollars. At that time, this was an enormous sum. Thanks to this unexpected windfall, the couple was able to take the world trip they'd always dreamed of and enjoy an absolutely wonderful time. In 1985, after spending all the money, they returned home, and life went back to normal. However, from this point on, contradictions between them began to emerge. John wanted to settle down, planning to buy a house and have children. But Anita, in her 20s, felt her life was just beginning and there were still many things she wanted to do, such as pursuing higher education, getting qualifications, learning Spanish, traveling, and so on. Their disagreements grew larger, leading to frequent arguments. Finally, at the beginning of 1986, they decided to separate. Anita moved back to Blacktown to live with her parents, while John moved back to his parents' house. However, after calming down, both decided to meet and discuss things clearly. On May 1, 1986, they saw each other again after a period of separation. They listened and understood each other's thoughts better and decided to discuss everything together in the future, willing to compromise and reconcile their relationship. That day, Anita went to John's house for dinner and they discussed buying a house. They also planned to attend John's sister's birthday party a few days later. But just when everything seemed to be getting back on track, Anita suddenly disappeared mysteriously. Even more suspicious was John's reaction when he learned his wife was missing. Instead of searching for her, he bought a bottle of whiskey to bring to his father-in-law's house to drink. Mr. Lin, who was already unhappy with his son-in-law after their separation, was even angrier seeing him bring alcohol while his daughter was missing. He scolded John harshly. John didn't say anything and just turned to leave for home and sleep. At this point, many people would naturally think it was obvious he was the murderer. Police thought the same way. They identified John as the prime suspect and brought him to the station for interrogation. However, just at this moment, an unexpected report turned the investigation upside down. At Prospect, a grassland to the south of Blacktown, a farmer discovered his dairy cows gathered in one corner of the field, crowding around something and refusing to leave. Curious, he got closer and witnessed a horrifying scene he would never forget for the rest of his life. On the grass lay a woman's body without clothes, covered in blood, with barely a patch of skin left unmarked. Shocked, the farmer quickly called the police. A large force of police quickly arrived at the scene. After preliminary autopsy examination, forensic specialists discovered the body had numerous wounds and signs of sexual assault. Most heartbreaking of all, the woman's eyes remained wide open, as if despair and pain was still imprinted in them. The forensic pathologist concluded that the victim had her throat cut, and the time from when the cut was made to when death occurred lasted about 2 minutes. Those 2 minutes were enough for someone to experience torture like hell. At that time, the only woman reported missing locally was Anita, so police removed the gold ring from the victim's finger and gave it to the victim's family to identify. When John saw the ring, he immediately collapsed to the ground, sobbing because it was the wedding ring he had personally chosen for Anita. Next, Anita's father, Mr. Lynn, arrived to identify the body. His hands trembling, he lifted the white cloth. Seeing his daughter's body covered in injuries, he couldn't bear the shock and fainted. Upon waking, Mr. Lynn cried out, "Anita, my daughter." The 26-year-old girl, full of vitality, had to endure the most extreme suffering before her life ended. That horrifying night, police were also shocked by the perpetrator's brutality. Many police officers silently swore they would catch this beast and make him pay for his crimes. The first step of the investigation was to interrogate John, who was already under suspicion. In the interrogation room, John appeared panicked, his eyes hollow. Police pressed him. "Admit it, you killed Anita." Initially, John denied it, but faced with the increasingly harsh attitude of the police, he finally broke down and cried out, "It must have been me." Getting such an easy confession made the police suspicious. Moreover, John's mental state was clearly unstable, so his words couldn't be completely trusted. Police later met with John's friends. All of them said John loved Anita very much. Even when they were separated, he was always concerned about her. John couldn't possibly harm his wife. The forensic test results that followed completely rejected the police's hypothesis. The marks on Anita's body indicated that the perpetrator wasn't just one person but a group. Her time of death was determined to be around the evening of May 2 to the early morning of May 3. During this time, John was at his mother's house and couldn't have committed the crime. Clearly, the police had arrested the wrong person. John was innocent. Police returned to the grassland and asked the farmer if he had heard anything unusual that night of May 2. The farmer recalled that he had heard a woman screaming from the nearby field, but he thought it was a couple and didn't pay attention. Police identified the grassland as the primary crime scene, but oddly, after thoroughly searching the area, they found no clues. So police shifted their investigation focus to Blacktown train station, the last place Anita could have been seen. A female officer dressed similarly to Anita took the 9:12 p.m. train from Sydney to Blacktown. Along the way, she showed Anita's photo to each passenger, but unfortunately, no one could provide useful information. Additionally, police discovered that all public phones at Blacktown station were broken. This explained why Anita couldn't call her father that night. Based on the clues they had, the police developed a theory. Around 9:40 p.m. on May 2, after getting off the train, Anita wanted to contact her family but couldn't find a working phone and couldn't get a taxi. So she decided to walk home. She likely encountered danger on the way. Police began investigating along the route Anita usually took home. However, there were no surveillance cameras at that time, so they could only focus on screening people with criminal records related to sexual crimes or violence. Still, they found no breakthrough. The case was stalled when, on the morning of May 10, a police officer reviewing recent case reports suddenly discovered an extremely important detail. On the night Anita went missing, a young boy reported to police that he and his sister witnessed a kidnapping. That night, they heard screaming on the street. Looking out the window, they saw a girl being dragged into a dirty white car with exposed gray primer paint. The boy ran outside, but the car had already driven away. Later, the two siblings reported it to the police. Not long after, P., a neighbor of the two siblings, came home and learned of what had happened. He immediately got in a car with his girlfriend to search for the white car. They found it near the grass field, but found no one in it and saw nothing unusual in the field. So they returned home. Additionally, a 16-year-old teenager also reported that around 9:45 p.m. that night, he heard screaming lasting about 30 seconds. Running outside, he saw a white car with its lights off driving away. Through the rear window, he could see two men forcefully holding a struggling woman. Police, after receiving reports that night, did send people to search the nearby area, but got no results. Based on these clues, police believed the kidnapped woman was very likely Anita. They immediately launched a citywide search for the white car. However, while everyone was busy with the investigation, another troubling incident occurred. At 9 a.m. on May 10, 1986, Ray, a host of an Australian television station, suddenly announced the autopsy report of Anita live on air in the morning broadcast, and even read aloud the disturbing details. He said that after reading the report, he was extremely angry and thought the public should know about this. So he broadcast the report content on his own initiative. The broadcast shook the entire nation. Police phone lines were bombarded with calls. People were both furious about the leak of the autopsy report and horrified by the brutal details of the case. But the biggest headache was for the police conducting the investigation. The whole country knowing about it was like hitting the grass to scare away the snake, greatly increasing the difficulty of solving the case. They immediately conducted an internal investigation but couldn't find the source of the leak. However, this incident also brought unexpected benefits to the police. People throughout Australia actively provided information and voluntarily donated money to help solve the case. The New South Wales government placed a reward of $50.00 Australian dollars for anyone providing useful information. On May 10, 1986, the family organized a funeral service for Anita. Many people voluntarily attended to say goodbye to this unfortunate girl. The most devastated person at the funeral was John, who had previously confessed to the crime. During the funeral, he suddenly lost control and screamed, "Don't take her away. Please don't take her away." His voice was full of despair and helplessness. Finally, several people had to pull him away from the funeral. After Anita's death, John completely fell apart, drowning in alcohol, living miserably day by day, and even hoping to die from drinking too much so he could be with Anita. It was clear he truly loved Anita, and his previous confession was just a result of extreme pain. This funeral wasn't just a farewell but also seemed to be a warning to all of Australian society. The public's outrage and concern put enormous pressure on the police. Fortunately, right after the funeral, the case had a major breakthrough. When reviewing files again, police discovered that on May 2, the day Anita was kidnapped, there was a car theft report. The stolen car was a white vehicle very similar to the one suspected in the case. From this led, police quickly identified three men who had stolen John's car: John Chave, Michael Murdoch, and Leslie Murphy. All three were known to the police, especially Travers. This name was very familiar to them. Travers's upbringing could be seen as a textbook example of a criminal. A father who was an alcoholic gambler abused the family and used drugs. A mother who was incompetent and unable to discipline her children. His biggest hobby was tormenting animals, even having relations with them. Many people had witnessed him doing indescribable things with sheep, pigs, chickens, and so on. Besides that, he was also a sex offender, frequently using knives to threaten women and weak-looking men at train stations or public bathrooms. Despite being only 18 years old, he was involved in at least 12 sexual assault cases, a true devil. The other two accomplices, while not as extreme as Travers, were also no saints. Michael, 18 years old, was Travers's loyal younger follower, spending his days drinking, stealing, fighting, etc. Leslie, 22 years old, had a hot temper and had been arrested multiple times for car theft. All three had criminal records and had just stolen a white car. So police quickly identified him as prime suspects and proceeded with arrests. After the arrests, Police interrogated each suspect separately. During interrogation, the police didn't directly mention Anita's case but only asked about the car theft. Leslie showed great composure and answered clearly without any suspicious behavior. But Travers was completely different, whether it was extreme nervousness or simply stupidity. From the very beginning, he kept his mouth shut, saying, "I didn't cut her throat." This statement amounted to a confession, because police hadn't even mentioned anything about Anita having her throat cut. Travers was arrested, while Michael and Leslie were temporarily released but secretly monitored by police. On May 22, 1986, Travers, in prison, had a nicotine craving. He asked the police to contact his girlfriend, Catherine, to buy cigarettes for him. Police agreed and suggested they meet and asked Catherine to cooperate in gathering information from Travers. Catherine agreed immediately. So Catherine wore a listening device and went to see Travers. Travers didn't suspect anything. He bragged about his violent acts and even laughed with glee as he described the details of how Anita was harmed. He confessed that the night of the incident, besides him, Michael, and Leslie, there were also Leslie's two brothers, Michael Murphy and Gary Murphy, who participated. After recounting the details of the case, Travers even tried to convince Catherine to help him destroy the weapon. Clothes and white car. More terrifying, he planned an escape, wanting Catherine to sabotage the train tracks so a train would crash into the prison, and he could take the opportunity to escape. If that plan failed, he would ask Leslie and Michael to organize a prison break. It's unclear if he was just too arrogant or had mental issues. But he came up with such elaborate plans. Police continued to have Catherine wear the listening device and go to Michael's house. From Michael, the police gathered more details about the case. After obtaining the recordings, police found the weapon, clothes, and the white car. They continued investigating the remaining two suspects. Michael, 33 years old, was the oldest of 9 children in his family. He had been sentenced to 25 years for multiple burglaries and had successfully escaped. Remaining at large. Gary, 28 years old, had a personality disorder. In friends' eyes, he was an honest, decent laborer, but in reality, he had been arrested multiple times for car theft. With sufficient witnesses, evidence, and confessions, police proceeded to arrest the remaining 4 suspects. From when Anita was murdered to when all suspects were arrested, Australian police took only 22 days. It could be said that their work efficiency was very high. The shocking case was finally solved. Notably, when police raided Gary's hideout, he was so frightened that he wet himself extremely quickly. During interrogation, based on the confessions of all suspects, police reconstructed the entire sequence of events in the murder case. On the night of May 2, 1986, 5 drunk criminals drove around the streets. By chance, they spotted Anita, a young, beautiful girl walking alone. Lust surged up, they subdued Anita, dragged her into the car, and quickly fled the scene. In the confined space of the car, the 5 took turns sexually assaulting and beating Anita. Anita desperately resisted. She begged, "Please don't do this, I'm already married, and I'm menstruating, please spare me." However, Anita's pleas only resulted in more brutal torture. Travers even held a knife to her throat to threaten her, "Shut up or I'll kill you." Along the way, they used Anita's money to buy gas and then drove to the grassland to the south. There, they dragged Anita, who was barely conscious, out of the car, pulled her over barbed wire fencing, and threw her to the ground, continuing to assault her. Just at that moment, a car pulled up. 2 people got out, holding flashlights and looking around. Seeing this, the group immediately lay on the ground and covered Anita's mouth. It was P and his girlfriend that we mentioned before. They had gotten very close to Anita, just a few meters away from being able to see her. It was a shame, the night sky hid everything. They had missed the only opportunity to save Anita. However, some people argue that even if they had discovered her, they might not have been able to change the outcome, and they themselves might have been harmed as well. The Five Devils torture lasted at least an hour. Finally, when Michael sobered up a bit, he began to fear that everything would be exposed. He said to the other four, "She's seen our faces, heard our names. Absolutely, she cannot survive." All agreed with this decision, but no one wanted to do it first. Finally, Travers took a knife and cut Anita's throat. After committing the crime, they quickly fled the scene and burned all the clothes they had worn during the crime. However, Travers foolishly kept a pair of jeans as a souvenir. He didn't realize this pair of pants would become crucial evidence helping police convict him. On May 16, 1987, the trial for this shocking case, which the media called the trial of the century, officially began. The five criminals were brought to court amidst the outrage of people across the nation. Throughout the trial, crowds of angry people gathered outside the courthouse with banners expressing their fury. They even made effigies hung on trees as protests, demanding that the death penalty be reinstated to punish these inhuman criminals. The five criminals were charged with over 50 counts, including kidnapping, theft, robbery, prison escape, sexual assault, murder, and so on, but they refused to admit guilt and tried every way to evade responsibility. The four others all tried to blame Travers for Anita's murder to reduce their own sentences. Michael's lawyer used the excuse that the media reported too much about the case, which would influence the jury. Requesting an adjournment, Gary's lawyer argued that his client had low intelligence and couldn't distinguish right from wrong, so he shouldn't be sentenced. However, faced with irrefutable evidence, their desperate attempts were futile. On June 10, 1987, after 54 days of trial, all five were convicted of sexual assault and murder. On June 16, the New South Wales Supreme Court announced that all five defendants were sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Because Australia had abolished capital punishment, this was the harshest sentence in Australia at that time. The shocking case that had outraged Australian public opinion finally came to a close. During the trial, the chief judge couldn't hold back tears and emotionally said this was one of the most horrific sexual abuse murder cases he had ever seen. The prosecutor also bluntly declared that Anita's murder was one of the most brutal and inhumane killings in the state's history. Although the five criminals had received appropriate punishments, for Anita's family, the nightmare was far from over. After Anita's death, John sank into sorrow and drug addiction. His life fell apart, but time gradually healed the wounds. Eventually, John pulled himself out of the abyss. He often went to church, sitting quietly in front of Anita's photograph, whispering words of remembrance. Many years later, John found the courage to remarry, have children, and start a new life. But he had changed his name, trying to escape his past. It wasn't until his eldest son grew up that John realized changing his name couldn't erase the pain. Finally, with his son's help, he changed back to his old name and chose to face his past. The pain in Anita's parents' hearts never truly ended. They converted this pain into action. Together with the family of a victim from another case, they established an organization to support families of murder victims called the Homicide Victims Support Association. It provided psychological support to families of victims, helping unfortunate families overcome difficulties and start new lives. Later, this organization collaborated with the government to raise $9.4 million Australian dollars to establish the Centre for Children and Young People Who Lost Loved Ones Through Murder. This center brought warmth and comfort to these families during their darkest days. As for the five criminals who escaped the death penalty, they had to endure endless suffering in prison. Travers, from the time of his conviction, was held in various prisons. In 1996, he even attempted to escape by damaging the prison's window frame, but failed. From then on, he was monitored more closely. Michael was diagnosed with liver cancer in prison and died on May 21, 2019. Gary was beaten and brutally tortured in prison for Anita's case. On June 25, 2019, He was beaten severely on the head by a group of inmates in the prison woodshop and had to be rushed to the hospital in critical condition. The other 2 criminals were also discriminated against in prison, living miserable lives. What they went through was perhaps the most fitting punishment of all. The Anita Cobby case had a profound impact on Australia, becoming the subject of many true crime documentaries and leaving a deep mark on film and television works. To honor Anita, the government named a park after her in Blacktown so that people would forever remember the life of this unfortunate young girl on this patch of green land. Hopefully, such tragedies will never happen again. That concludes today's video, and I'll see you again in the next one. Thank you for watching.